Tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, Aaron and I will break down our thoughts on the Buffalo Bills 2024 draft class, power rank our picks from our favorites, and go through any of the moves since then. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You were joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, this is the real offseason. People pretend like the offseason starts after the first game's done, but you got free agency, you got all the salary cap moves to get ready, then you got mock draft season, then you got the real draft season. Now, May 1st is when the real offseason starts. Where is my football?
This is the we'll still have like the camps and things. Not that there's anything interesting really going on there.
Not that they're allowed to do anything.
But there'll be like tidbits, right? We'll get some press conferences. We will get content from the Bills. But then like when that dies down, that's like the nothingness of the actual off season in terms of content creating, right? The players get to finally go and relax and get some stuff in here before they come back. And it always, that's the weirdest part of the time whenever I talk to people about getting into the content game. Like, for the most part, this is all NFL never stops, right? So there's always something we can be talking about. And we say that, and then Bean will probably sign one of these free agents after where we're talking about that. It's in this period of time where nothing's going to happen, but the NFL never stops. And so there's always part of this content schedule. And then we hit that point after the camps. And it feels so much longer. And then when you look at the calendar, it's only not even 8 weeks. It's like 7 weeks or something. It's not even really that long in terms of the calendar, but it feels like it's forever to not have football because of the way the NFL has. You got the playoffs, you have free agency, way they scheduled the draft. They've done a better job than any league out there in terms of just making it a year-long process. But then you have to deal with these 2 months where there's
a schedule release show on Thursday. Like they literally have monopolized every possible moment
all the time. And so it's good if you are in the content business game, but yes. And the good thing for us is we were just talking offline, the weather's getting nicer in our areas of the world. So if you're going to have low levels of content, at least the weather can be nice so you can actually enjoy not having to be crazy in terms of coming up with content.
You're getting some shout outs here in the chat. Buff Everett and Cliff congratulating you on the first birdie and on your
of the year. I just want to make that clear that it wasn't my first birdie ever.
First birdie ever? That's good for you, man. That's awesome.
Yes, the first one of the year. It has been a slow start to a spring golf year. So yeah, thank you for that.
Nice. So before we get into tonight's actual show topic, where we're gonna power rank our draft picks, instead of just going through pick by pick, this was your suggestion. I really liked it to go through and we'll kind of power rank our favorite picks based on either value or whatever logical
how
reason
we see
that we want to use. Fit, need, whatever they did. We'll kind of rank it that way. I like that. First, there were 3 little tidbits of news that have happened since the draft. After the draft, the Buffalo Bills signed Quintez Cephus, which was an interesting camp body. He was a guy that, at one point did kind of have a cup of coffee with the Lions where it seemed like he might matter as a big bodied kind of powerful possession receiver. I gotta be honest. I think his odds of making the roster are incredibly low. Maybe 0. Like I don't think there's much of a path for him to make the roster, but it's a type. It's a type they're trying to build. It's not the kind of body type that they've really had. We actually had shout out to Steve Mathis. He's always good at reminding people of this. We actually had a little bit of size on the practice squad with the Terrell Shavers and the Brian Thompsons. And we actually have a little bit of size hidden down there that maybe there's a shot at one of those guys competing for a 6th spot here. I don't think they have a great path either, but it's possible. but I guess with the Justin Shorters of the world and some of the special teams roles, I guess there's a non-zero chance that Quintez Cephus could, try to fight for something, but most likely a camp body.
I think they're going to give him a chance to compete for potentially that last spot or a practice squad spot.
Practice squad spots. And for anybody who doesn't know, the new structure, practice squad positions now make like 320,000. Like the week, the paychecks you get each week plus the training camp money, like 320 grand to be around the team all the time. And that's not even including if you get called up, where then you get actual minimum game checks for that week.
It's like
you get more.
It's like the NBA having like those two-way deals with players where it's like, hey, we're going to kind of have you be part of the team. We're going to pay you like you are for a little bit. And we've seen the Bills pulling guys up from the practice squad every year of the past 5 years.
The next signing matters more than this one.
Well, and so I do like Cephus, though. I think that in terms of the players that are on the bottom of that wide receiver roster, like there's some guys that maybe we haven't seen enough of. And so I can understand why we buy into the idea like, hey, maybe they can hit ceilings. But not that we've seen a lot of Cephus, but we've seen him play at the NFL level and he can matchups at the NFL level. The concern is not playing for a year. I'm sure he's in shape. I'm sure he's physically in shape.
He is only 26.
Yeah,
he is only 26.
But I always get nervous unless you're like a high-end player, like a Calvin Ridley type, to take a year off football is real. Like this is not a game. This is a game that passes people by pretty quickly. So they worked him out. They felt comfortable with it. But yeah, I think he's competing for that bottom roster, potential practice squad, maybe last receiver on the roster type spot.
Yeah, and again, he's 6'1", 210. Like he's a big physical dude. He's not super fast, but he plays physical.
Yeah.
He's way more of like that big-bodied, almost pseudo tight end type thing. But you're still talking about a guy who has 600 yards in the NFL. That's not something any of our other practice squad guys have. He has produced in the NFL, although just in two relatively minimal opportunities with the Lions. But he got out there, made some plays. It's mildly interesting.
Sure.
The other end of the spectrum, not a guy who is young, is the total other end. Right before the show tonight, the Bills signed Deion Jones.
Yeah.
Deion Jones is a guy that I desperately wanted when he was a free agent a couple years ago. And if you go back 5 years ago, you would have caught me making arguments that he was like the new modern prototype of linebacker in the NFL. Like his range and coverage ability and sideline to sideline speed at being able to play an every down role at like 225, 230, you just did not see that in the NFL. And he was really part of that new wave that now is much more prevalent and almost everybody is doing that. But like 5-6 years ago, his run in 2017, 2018, 2019, he was exactly what I wanted. And honestly, kind of what Matt Milano has become in that role. He hasn't had that the last couple of years. But I will say, I mean this sincerely, I'd rather him than AJ Klein.
Sure.
Like I'd rather what's left of Deion Jones than what was left of AJ Klein. So out of the, whatever health Bale Inspector can keep together consistently, whatever Nicholas Morrow has left, whatever Deion Jones has left, I kind of think there's 2 roster spots for those 3 guys as linebacker 5 and 6, and that the other guy is probably going to be the practice squad AJ Klein call up. So I'm good with that because I would rather that than what we saw in the playoffs last year where things really fell apart because we just didn't have the depth.
Yeah, sure. And I think the practice squad call up role is probably best for him because I do think they're going to probably have to, whatever those bodies are that are going to be on the active roster with the prioritizing kickoffs and special teams this year, like I'm sure he does play special teams. He hasn't done it a ton lately in the NFL. And so I think they'll prioritize
at this age and health. Like Morrow probably has more of that. Inspector certainly has more special teams.
And some of the guys that we're going to talk about tonight, I think that's going to be the path.
Yeah, Ulofoshio for sure is way more ready for special teams.
Yes, I'm glad you know how to say his name clearly because I'm going to lean on you for that tonight. But that's going to be the path for some of these young guys that they're bringing in with these picks here over the next couple of years is with the prioritization of special teams. You're going to get more of that. And so let him kind of hang out. I think that the Bills have done a really good job over the last few years, and you're seeing other teams do it, of leaning into that practice squad thing. You talk about the money that's there, and since the COVID year of really having more availability to bring guys up more often and have that almost as like a pseudo bench spot, injured reserve spot, because you're getting more games. And I think as they grow, we hear Goodell talking about more and more games being added to the schedule. If that continues, I would expect practice squad to be more of a priority position for aging vets to just get on a team. You don't have to make the 53-man roster, but you can have a spot where you're going to probably get called on during the year because someone's going to get hurt.
Yeah, and I think that there's a couple things. I found one of the questions here. I know I've seen this floating around a lot. And this is not to pick on JG because
Right, yeah,
a
sure.
lot of people were speculating about this. The signing of a veteran minimum guy who could not catch on a roster like Deion Jones is not any connectivity to Matt Milano, good or bad. Now, that doesn't mean that, hey, everything's great with Matt Milano and there's no concern. But one, all of the injury people that I trust, you watched him moving around at the mini camp. And as a refresher, he was moving around at the mini camp now in April, like 5 months before the season starts. I think we're okay here. I don't have any concern. I can't swear to that. I don't know. I don't know what his condition is. I'm sure he's still getting fully back into football shape, but I don't believe there's anything to be overly concerned with. And regardless, Deion Jones has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So, like,
If
regardless,
anything, it might be that just like a can't buy. We heard Bean talk about like,
yeah,
I think pumping the brakes on the Milano stuff, just saying like, we expect him for camp, but you never know if he'll be totally ready to take on all the reps to start camp. So you're going to need some linebackers. That would be the only connection to, but that would not be Deion Jones doing the Milano role. It would be other guys, and then him taking those snaps in behind in the practice team rep type stuff. So yeah, it's just getting camp bodies in, and then to your point, having that practice squad body available on your roster now before you have to get all that stuff placed in camp.
Yeah, if the question is what happens if Matt Milano's not ready, the answer has nothing to do with Deion Jones.
Correct.
Deion Jones is like 5th or 6th on that list of answers of what would happen in those moments. So let's hope that we don't need to see that. But
I don't want to talk about this anymore.
I'd rather have him than AJ Klein. So
yes,
we'll see
this was supposed to be a fun show.
The third bit of news was also a very, very anticipated, expected move. The Bills picked up the 5th-year option on Gregory Rousseau.
Wait, what?
That was
they did?
I was shocking. No one saw this coming. The Bills actually kind of sneak out a benefit here. He technically didn't qualify for any of the escalators in the elements because 2 years he finished at like 49.7 and 48.8% of snaps. Otherwise, if he was above 50%, it would have bumped up a couple more $1 million into the next tier for playing time incentive because he was right on the edge twice. So he was over 50% the 1 year, but the other 2 years, because he missed a couple games, he ended up like percentage points below. And unfortunately for him, it actually cost him like $2.5 million in what his 5th-year option was. So he's at the lowest one, which is $13 million, which you had put out a tweet earlier, and I've tried to explain a dozen times now. The 5th-year option is not that much of a benefit anymore, right? The scenario the Bills have is about as good of a benefit as you can get, except for quarterback, where you have a guy that is good enough to pick up the option, but because of injuries or some other circumstance, didn't qualify for any of the escalators. As an example, Jamar Chase is $21.8 million. By chance, do you know what the franchise tag number for wide receivers is this year? It's $21.8 million.
Yeah.
So next year, he's going to be this year's franchise tag number. The franchise tag does go up a little bit next year, but it's like a 10% coupon on just applying the franchise tag.
Yeah.
The team has the same contract control. Like the new CBA, other than quarterback, you still get like a 40% discount. But other than quarterback, and only like the $55 million franchise quarterbacks, like the top end guys, Those are the only ones. That's the only actual benefit anymore. Those you get a legit like 40% coupon. Anybody else, it's like that much of a benefit.
Yeah, and I think the situation with Tremaine Edmonds, there's like benefit in those types of situations where you have a guy that's like, we don't know if we want to go further with this or extend them, or you're in those conversations. But yeah, no, what really frustrated me here is over draft weekend, I heard Peter Schrager say it in the live coverage. I heard a ton of people parroting it after the fact when we will talk about the Worthy pick, but the fact that the Bills traded out of the first round, they're like, oh my God, they gave up the 5th year. What an asset to just walk away from. And it's like, they got Josh Allen, right? Like the premium positions here aren't really like wide receiver is going to get paid in the league. And if he's whatever guy they pick, which ended up being Keon Coleman, if he's good enough, they're going to extend him anyway. They can franchise tag him. Like none of this is going to be in play. And it just feels like it's become this talking point, your point that was outdated from a couple of years ago where it meant more. And now people are just applying it as like, oh my God, if you can get to keep that 5th year option, it's such an asset. And it's like, oh, maybe.
Yeah.
A 10% coupon. Cool.
Yes. For 90% of people, the only exception is, I guess, if you have like a market setting guy.
Sure.
So if you happen to stumble upon Micah Parsons and he's going to get $35 million a year, yes, it's one extra buffer year in between. But if you like, the odds of drafting Justin Jefferson and Micah Parsons is so
at 28,
low,
especially.
Yeah, most of those picks are not going to turn out that way. Most of them are going to be in between, and that's why so many guys didn't even have their 5th year option picked up this year. I think 9 of the first round picks didn't even have their 5th year option picked up.
Mac Jones did though.
The Bills ended up kind of benefiting, kind of threading that needle. We have a player that's good enough to pick it up, but not so much that it's a financial burden.
They should also just toss Groot that $2 million under the table.
Yeah. Well, so the other alternative is like with the Bills last year with Ed Oliver, we just used it as a lead-in to sign a moderate extension where the team was taking a little bit of risk in signing you early, but if you turn out to be as good as we think you are, we get a big discount. Yeah. So
which we did.
I will be okay. I have to play around with the numbers. I'm not sure how high I'd want to go with Groot on that. But if they sign a moderate level deal that ends up being a leap of faith that, hey, we're betting you can be a 13, 14, $15 million guy. We're not going to give you the 20, like Jonathan Grenard got like 22 million. Danielle Hunter got like 25 million. We're not doing anything like that. But if we can get him back just above his 5th year option number, I'd lock him in for that and risk it that, hey, he does turn into the 8 to 10 sack a year guy that we think he can be, plus his great run defense and all the other things that he provides.
You don't want that comp pick? I felt like you were going to say you want him to go so you could get a comp pick.
If he doesn't take that level of contract, I'm not ready to pay him $20 million. I'll let somebody else pay him $20 million. I want 12 to 15 sacks if I'm getting $20 million.
Yeah.
But we'll see where that one goes.
Yeah, we got a long time for that.
I'm going to throw a curveball here just because you talked about the 5th year option and the trade down. Our guy, William Mattar, was throwing heaters today. Like we were going back and forth. We put out a tweet talking about, tell us what our segment should be for Pump the Brakes, because we did have to reschedule from last night to tonight. So we're kind of putting out there asking for fans to let us know. And Bill himself chimed in with what he wanted to pump the brakes on. And it was literally what you and I had been kind of workshopping, getting ready for the show. He said, I think we should pump our brakes on this whole Kansas City trade thing. We can't make every move based on what our rival is thinking. And that kind of little brother mentality makes total sense to me. Like, that's not what I want to see the Bills making decisions based on. And that, if you think a move is the right move, you do it for that reason, because you were going to take Keon Coleman at 28 anyways. And if you want to move down, just as an example, Joe, only one person, but I know a lot of our folks also listen to Joe Marino. Joe Marino said he had, Worthy ranked 49th, and that, like, if somebody wants to trade up with you and take the 49th rated player, God bless him. Let him give you an extra 3rd round pick to go and do that. And we'll talk about where we have DeWayne Carter ranked later on. But all that's going to matter, it's a results-based business. If Keon Coleman ends up being trash, it won't matter. Everybody's going to, bash the trade anyways. And if
Correct.
Keon Coleman then ends up being good, it's going to look brilliant anyways. It'll all be results
Yeah,
based.
and if Worthy ends up great,
yeah, if Worthy ends up being Deshaun Jackson, nobody's going to care. But if he ends up being John Ross, everybody's going to laugh. So
right.
it's results based. But if your pick was going to be Keon Coleman anyways, or it sounds like it was kind of Coleman or Leggett, and they knew they were going to get one of those two. If they're going to do that, then yeah, get the free money, get the value by moving down a couple times, and let your rival take somebody you weren't going to take anyways.
Yeah, it also has to do with my sign tonight and the narrative that has been pushed about to me, it reeks of we've been emotionally abused by this team. To your point, the little brother syndrome. And because it was this team, it is a total freak out. If it was anyone else, we wouldn't have batted an eye. Again, Joe Marino brought up a great point. If they traded up to take Nate Wiggins, does anybody care? Like, it's because it was
one of the offensive tackles.
Yes, it was because it was a wide receiver. Although clearly, one, I don't think Bean also had Worthy as high on his board for what the Bills were looking for. We had
Clearly
talked
not,
about
because he would have just taken him if he did.
Correct. Yeah. And we've talked about this a ton in terms of like what were the Bills looking for. Like, I liked Lad McConkey a lot. I think he can do inside outside. I didn't hate Worthy, but it just didn't. It was always like, okay, if you're going to take Worthy, you have to also double dip. Like, there's no question you have to double dip because they're still not going to find the guy.
You need that body type later,
the type that they want. And so it just didn't feel like it made sense. And yeah, it makes perfect sense for Kansas City to draft a guy like this. But I think so many people have pointed out, I don't have the list on me, of Kansas City has not actually been that good at drafting skill position players outside of Pacheco and Tyreek Hill. And you have to go all the way back to Kelsey. Like, it has not been a great run for them. There's been way more misses than there is hits. We just think of the hits because those are the ones that have destroyed us. But to assume Worthy is going to come in and be a hit instantly and be better than what the Bills got, or be the guy that now is going to dominate and kill the Bills, like, you cannot operate in that world. And I'm glad that Brandon Beane doesn't operate in that world. I know that our friend Joe DiBiase then took the idea of our actual good friend, Evan Lazar, the show, was on WGR saying that New England also wanted to move up into that spot and get up into to get Leggett,
because
to get Coleman.
They
wanted Coleman, and they were Sneaky Joe was trying to use that as like, aha, like he is willing to block somebody from trading if he feels threatened by them or whatever. But they had information that it was going to be for their guy. And like, that's just not how this works. Like, he was like, one, you want to be at 33. That is a high value pick. You have 18 hours to take calls, to field calls, to make trades, to look into your guy. That's almost more valuable than having the 32nd pick, even with having that 5th-year option. Like we talked about, like having the next day to take it over and think about it and get all the calls is a high value pick. I think Beane played it out right. He's not playing scared at Kansas City. He shouldn't play scared at Kansas City. They're not as far off as everybody thinks they are from beating the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't think Worthy going to the Kansas City Chiefs is really the thing that's going to put them over the top to keep beating us and be the big brother.
Yeah, that's not going to be why. That's not going to be the reason. No. So I just thought it was awesome that we were planning to do a sponsored by William Mattar Pump the Brakes segment, and literally this segment came directly from Bill, and having William Mattar's input himself be the Pump the Brakes topic was just so perfect. So they've been an awesome partner for us so far. You guys know them from their famous tagline, "Hurt in a car, call William Mattar." The phone number, the jingle. They're great people to work with. They've been really exciting here. And now Bill's already given us direct content besides the sponsorship. So,
that's it. And I want to say, like, I do understand why people, and I think Brandon Beane even said it on McAfee, like, I get why people, the optics of making a trade with KC, the emotional abuse that we've suffered. I don't want to discredit people for immediately jumping there, but then to like continue on after Brandon Beane's explained it. And like, it is all just optics. And sometimes optics feel frustrating, but then when you get like the logical explanation, you got to take in that information and understand like, oh yeah, like they were probably going to just trade up, or he was going to just fall into their laps anyway, and we weren't going to get anything for it. And so like, why wouldn't you take advantage and make the trade that's good for you, no matter what it is they were going to ultimately end up doing? So
the fact that the fact that there are people who genuinely meant it, that I would rather the Bills just took Keon Coleman at 28 and let the Chiefs get Worthy at 32 on the principle of not wanting to have the perception of helping them, rather than taking value from them and taking better picks from them to get our guy later and their guy earlier, boggles my mind.
That's
I just
crazy.
can't possibly fathom. And wait until you see my power ranking.
Yeah.
I'm real glad we got that 95th pick.
Yeah, well, and that's
we got that pick.
the other thing that's frustrating me about this whole conversation is Seth Walder, who I think does fine work. I don't think he does great work, but
There
I
are
think he does
lots of good analytics and metrics that come from that group.
correct.
It wasn't great in this moment.
Yeah, and that he was like, oh, this is the worst trade pick. I think Hans Uber has done a very good job of building his system and using pretty objective data since the year 2000 and all the different metrics that measure trade value. And he lined this up as fair. It was a fair deal for both teams. That's exactly what you're going to expect to see on draft day. And so that also added a murkiness to this conversation. And then I got to get on my guy.
To be presented as one of the 10 cheapest
Correct.
trade ups in first round history, and Uber laid out 110 that did not involve quarterbacks, all non-quarterback trade ups, and out of the 110 it was literally 65th. It was actually slightly above average. Not only was it not one of the worst 10 ever, but it was slightly above average in the return. So I think he was just kind of talking out of his mouth. Like I don't.
And it got clicks and it got the burn, and then it became part of the narrative. That's the problem with how we talk about things nowadays. And real quick before we move on from the subject, I got to burn my guy Nate Gary here because I love him so much. But he was so in his feelings about this whole thing going through it, and he made a point, and then a bunch of people loved it about like, I want to take the guy that Andy Reid wants because they are so smart and they're so successful that was his thing, was like, or you trade out of this to give them the guy he wants. I want to take, we should have wanted Xavier Worthy because that is who
Jordan
he
helping
wanted.
us out here.
Thank
Here
you, Jordan,
the names
for the
of
list.
the people. Andy Reid also wanted DeMarcus Robinson, Tremont Smith, Darwin Thompson, Mecole Hardman, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Cornell Powell, Sky Moore. He wanted to trade for Kadarius Toney. He wanted to sign Marquez Valdez-Scantling to a $10 million per year deal. Andy Reid wanted all those things too. Like, yes, when you have Andy Reid's play calling and Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, that is a cologne that covers all kinds of stink. You get to make up for all kinds of things. It's amazing. They are not some flawless, brilliant team that only makes right football decisions. They whiff all the time. The 3 draft classes after Mahomes, they literally netted 0 contributors. 3 full draft classes. So, yes, then they had the Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, really George Karlaftis, really nice draft. They had the Trent McDuffie draft. They had 2 really good ones after that. But they had 3 straight draft classes with 0 contributors. Like, they're not some flawless, brilliant team. They just have one of the greatest players in NFL history. They do. They have
Bills Mafia is not ready for the defense wins championships conversation about how last year went for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Kansas City's defense won the freaking championship.
Yeah.
Anyways, rant over. Shout out to our guys at William Mattar Law Offices. They've been awesome. Appreciate them and helped us out here. So in honor of this was your idea and I liked it a lot. Do you want to go in reverse order and count down, or do you want to start with our top? Do you want to do it as our top power rankings? Which direction do you want to go?
We can go either way, man. I'm open. Let's go 10-1. That's fine. We can work it that way.
Yeah, let's start with the lowest end one of where we want to go, and I will lead off then.
Kick it off
that way. My lowest power ranking is I'm gonna go Tylan Grable. I think there's some potential there, but I think the odds of him making the roster are really, really low. I actually think there are 2 guys drafted after him that have a higher chance of making the roster, maybe even a UDFA. I think he is our stereotypical couple-year project. He's a big guy. We'll see where it goes, but I don't have a ton of expectation for Tylan Grable coming in. I think he's got a lot of people to compete with to try to make a roster.
I had Travis Clayton at 10. Just because I get it. I get why there is some excitement about it, but
You hate 6'7", 300-pound guys that run a 4.8 40? What's wrong with you?
yeah, no, I get it. I understand all the multiple sports. I think it's cool. I think it's a perfect what to do with a 7th round pick is to get a guy that you can stash in this internet, like being played as good of a card as you can hand out for a 7th round pick. It's a developmental project. It probably will never work out. He'll probably won't ever see an NFL field in that way, but why not take a chance on a big dude athlete that maybe you could mold into something? It has happened before. But this to me screams like this is going to be what wide receivers are in training camp, but on the offensive line where people are just going to like, oh my God, we got to just give this guy a chance as the next Christian Wade. And I just don't, I don't want to put that pressure on him. And he's a 7th round pick for a reason. It's a big project. And I just don't see it working its way to a path onto the roster.
Yeah. So Clayton was my next pick. So I'll
yeah, it was a coin flip for me on these two. Yes.
The fact that there is some, not even some, there is ridiculous athletic upside.
Yeah.
And that we've seen this. Jordan Mailata did this. Jordan Mailata came over with a rugby background simply as a huge athlete who had never played football before and now is turned into one of the best tackles in the NFL. So if you're going to take a dart throw on what probably would have been a throwaway 7th round pick that didn't have much of a chance to make the roster anyways, and if that random dude ended up panning out, your best case scenario is, oh, you got a new Alec Anderson, you got a new Ryan Vandemark. Like that's your best case scenario, realistically, with a 7th round pick, sort of finding literally another Jason Peters. Going that route, if you're going to try the Jason Peters, Jordan Mailata route, at least then maybe it's even a lower percentage. Maybe it's a 1% shot. But if you hit your 1% shot, it's a rocket ship and you hit it to the moon. So swing for the fences. Go ahead and try it because that 7th round pick probably wasn't going to make the roster anyways. But if this guy somehow does convert his crazy athleticism into real football, you have there are not many 6'7", 300-pound athletes who move like that. That's a ridiculous athletic specimen. If it works out, that's great.
Yeah. So I actually have sort of the opposite approach with why I put Grable at the 9th spot instead of the 10 is it also comes down to he has played football and not at the highest level, but UCF is not a slouch. Like they definitely is something there. And I like that he's played multiple positions of the game, coming from a quarterback to playing tight end. And he's got great athleticism, RAS score of 9.85. The size isn't there, but you can add on the weight, right? He needs to probably get a little bit more weight to play at the NFL level. I think that you talked about this a ton of times when we were doing mock drafts of just getting Cromer a 6'5" tackle to work with and a project to work with. The athleticism is there. He tests well in composite score and explosive grade, and he played pretty well once he finally settled into offensive tackle. So I think that there's like a little bit of a diamond in the rough potential there. Not saying he's going to come in and make the roster right away, but I think Cromer, this is the one to me where it seems like Cromer could really get in, dig into this as a project and make it maybe something that is a rotational offensive tackle down the road for them if he doesn't get plucked off a practice squad. But that one was a little more interesting to me in terms of already have some football knowledge under his belt. Like even just the small stuff of being able to know how to get out of a stance and kick slide and stuff like that. Like that's all stuff that Clayton's going to have to figure out and learn, where Grable has a little bit of an edge just in that spot already going into this. So both good size guys plus athletes. The weight is a concern for Grable, but you get him in an NFL building for a year and get him to barbell a handful of times and that'll pop on.
Yeah, I think I'd even go. I think there's a 10% chance of Grable making the roster, and there's a 1% chance of Clayton making the roster. But if Clayton hits, I think he could be way better than Grable has the potential of being. Like that's the idea, is that it's a super low chance that it hits, but if it does, I'm not exaggerating. The scenarios where it does work out are your Jason Peters and your Jordan Mailatas, where you took guys who were not tackles and just took their athletic capability and be like, hey, we think we can make you a tackle. And if that turns out, you get something special. So I just like the upside shot of it. But again, they were still my 9th and 10th guys. So
what about at 8? Where it gets a little more interesting as you get into this little part of the meat.
I had one more that was pretty easy for me because I also don't know that I see a chance for a guy Daequan Hardy's size to pan out. I'm intrigued, and I had him ahead of the other two because he does have punt return ability. I've been wanting a backup nickel. He checks all those boxes. Man, he's little. He's really, really tiny. So I'm curious. I want to see where that goes. It checks some boxes for me of things that I was intrigued by. There was no investment. It's a sixth round pick. There's no risk in doing that. But all of the guys, specifically the 7 guys ahead of him, I saw a much more direct path to making the roster. And he was one of the 3 that I didn't see a realistic, something odd would have to happen. I think Jamarcus Ingram has a pretty significant edge on him, short of him running away with the punt return job. That would be his real path to making it. So I moved him up ahead of the other 2 because punt return is a better shot of him making the roster than the other 2 tackles. So I put him 8th on my list for that reason.
I also have him at 8th, but I think he's got a pretty good shot here because when you think of like who has the ability to be a punt returner right now, it's him, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir.
Sure.
I'd rather have him doing it.
I guess she's competing with Isabella for a roster spot for that job.
Maybe, but in terms of the size, I understand it, but in checking him out, I'm not going to say I scouted him or grinded some film on him. He does play a little bit bigger than it, almost in a way.
He does throw his body around. He throws his body around.
And they do have a need for that backup nickel. And again, I'm not going to say he's going to make the 53, but I could see him sticking around as, again, a developmental project to maybe become the backup nickel special teams player, punt returner of the future. Might not get it all this year. And so because to your point, I see a direct path for contributions right now in front of him, it's hard for me to power rank him ahead. But this is, to your point, again, why he's picked in the 6th round. Like, there's not an expectation that he's going to come in and make an immediate impact. It's a, hey, get into camp and see what we can do. But I do think Sean McDermott's going to want to keep his hands on him just by the way that I've seen him play. He seems like a Bills guy that they can maybe get a little bit more out of. So I won't be shocked if he turns some heads here this summer with some big hits in training camp and gets a good little fan base going.
Yeah. I think there could be some fun stuff. And again, I do think he has a shot just because that job is not locked down by anybody. And he has a pretty nifty highlight reel of punt returns. So I'll take it. And I do think there's an intriguing path there to where we've been pounding the table for like, hey, who backs up Taron? And, it gets into that role.
Yeah.
So here's where it starts to get interesting because now you get into 7 guys that I think all have greater than 50-50 shots, if not greater than 80% shots of all making the roster. So now you're getting into value of where they got picked. You get into, positional value, starting opportunity, different areas like that. So my next one, I put, I'm going to flex here, Edefuan Ulofoshio. Edefuan Ulofoshio, who there's a couple people who had him ranked really highly. A couple draft experts out there who had him in like the higher end of what is, I think, admittedly, not a great linebacker class in whole. There are some injury challenges and being able to stay on the field, but he is a freaky athlete, which at a minimum translates to special teams. So I think that you're talking about a improvement on Tyler Medikevich because now you have a special teams role replaced, but he can play linebacker. He can get on the field. Right. He probably can push Dorian Williams or Nicholas Morrow or Deion Jones for that matter. Someone's going to win that 3rd linebacker spot of when they go in base defenses. And I would say right now that is probably Dorian Williams' job to lose. I think Ulofoshio can push him for that job. I would say Dorian Williams has it right now. But he has a shot for that. But I don't think there's any path realistically to him being an every snap player, which was kind of my tiebreaker here. It's not the highest premium position value, and I didn't see a direct pass. So I like him. I thought this was a nice value. I think that I trust some of the people who like him. I know when Joe Marino was on with us, he was one of the guys we picked in that mock draft for this exact reason. So I liked all those elements of it. I think he's, I'm not going to say lock, but I think he's an 80-90% chance of making the roster here. But I did have to put him last just because I had better arguments for the other guys.
The Bills have carried 5 linebackers
They have
recently?
carried 5. I do think with the new kickoff rules and how many special teams guys we've lost, I do think 6 is
6 is in play.
yeah, and
I have
I
not even
actually
looked at roster projections yet. I'm not a sicko, so
we'll see with the moves we've made. The biggest indicator to me is I don't know that we're going to do the 9 and 10 defensive linemen anymore. I think it's going to be more 8 or 9, and that one might go to the linebacker.
yeah,
Is my guess if I had to guess right now.
I also have him here. I'm not gonna try. I'm gonna have to go practice in my mirror.
Ulofoshio.
Maybe after we get offline, we can practice it together. A little intervention for me. So for me, this is clearly at this spot. I think I had a gap in between 6 or between 7 and 6 here because I think it's clearly special teams and it matters more. And I think the bigger bodies matter more than it used to be able to put some smaller guys on teams. So this screams to me modern special teams, modern kickoff, get him out there, try to make him your new type of Tyler Manikevich. Yeah, Nicholas
bringing
Wilson.
up here, Eric brought up about the struggles laterally. That's why I only am interested in like the 3-down run stuffing role, like the coming forward Terrell Dotson stuff. Like, hey, come downhill, use the athleticism, coming downhill and make tackles. I don't want you turning and pivoting and figuring out where to run in coverage. I don't know that I'm looking for that.
And we've seen Bobby Babich do a good job at putting guys in position to play to their flaws. So I think that if he is in a pinch where he needs to actually get in and play in some of those bigger sets, that they can get everybody else in coverage around him and allow him to blitz and allow him to run, defend, and things like that. But I think to start here, the expectation should be solely as a special teams guy, trying to build that next group of core special teamers that they've lost. It is really where I think they attacked a little bit in this draft. And I think it starts here at 7. So that's where I had him as well. I wonder, are we going to get a little different here coming up? What do we
I was just going to say, we've had only 2 slight differences at 9 and 10. So I'll let you lead off. Who's your number 6?
So at 6, I have Javon Solomon, which I don't know if that we do differ. Okay. I have him here, but this pick, I actually like it. I think this is, I don't think he's going to be an every down player for the Bills. And that's probably why I had him a little bit lower in terms of, I think he can come in immediately and provide a need. I think in the draft, I was talking about Jalen Harrell from Michigan a couple of times about just that I think this edge class wasn't good. And that you didn't have a lot. And so the drop off was big. But if you're going to take a swing on a guy, you want it to be a guy. I don't want another group. I don't want another edge setting run defender. I want a guy that I think can get some bend and that can attack and rush the passer and be on in 3rd down type situations. And that's what I see here. And I think that to me feels like a path to at least maybe not right away coming into the roster, but a guy that can learn from a Von Miller and come in and get a little bit bigger and put some weight on and learn from pros and be that other type of bendy guy, because they don't really have it in the room. Like AJ Epinesa has a little bit to him. He can get to the passer, but it'd be nice if you could put a little bit of a Lamborghini out there with Von Miller on 3rd down passing downs, that you had a guy that can get a little speed, can get a little bend. Like he's not the craziest athlete out there, but he's a good athlete. And I think that he provides something different that that edge room needs a little bit right now that they didn't have. And so if you're going to take a project, take a guy that can rush the passer. I mean, super productive in college, because proven that he can close and get sacks. That's the kind of developmental project I'm taking. So I like him here.
I like it. I went with Ray Davis next. I like Ray Davis. I think there's a sneaky chance that he's going to have some nice plays. I think he's probably pretty similar to Tyler Johnson. Like I think that he's that kind of versatile all-around back that can make some nice cuts. I think he has some Devin Singletary to him. I think he has some Zach Moss to him. But I think he's clearly going to be the backup running back. I think he'll end up sliding in as RB2, probably ahead of Tyler Johnson. But it's still a running back. It still was probably I would have been fine if they had like. It's funny because the guy that I wanted them to pick was the guy you just picked for your spot. So the fact that they got Solomon later, he was the top pass rusher that I wanted at that point, and they got him later on. So it ended up being fine. But I also would have been fine if they waited to take a running back in the 5th round, or if they took one with more of the size speed combo of some of the other guys. But he was good. He was on the list of guys that I wanted. I think he's going to come in with roster control. I know he's older, which freaks some people out, but I don't care because I don't ever want to sign a running back to a second contract. So I don't care how old he is when he starts. I only want 4 years, and this will be fine. He'll give us these 4 years here. So I like Ray Davis. I think he's going to be fun. I think that there's a chance that, honestly, if, God forbid something happened to James Cook, I think he could probably jump in, and he and Tyler Johnson would be perfectly fine and would be a nice modern NFL backfield. And that's good by me, but I also would have been fine if we waited to our last 5th round pick to take a running back, because I think anybody in that range is pretty similar to Ty Johnson. They're going to be the same kind of guy. So I like Ray Davis. I think he's a roster lock. I think he's absolutely going to be there with those guys in that backfield as backing up James Cook. But I did put him here as my 6th guy just because I don't think he was a big difference maker, and I thought we picked him at the early end of where he could
go. So I had Ray Davis at 5. And the reason I had him ahead of Solomon was because I think that role of RB2, which I do think he's going to win, I think he'll win out at RB2, is going to just be, he's going to get on the field more, and there'll be production there, and there'll be big plays that he needs to make. And I think he provides something that the Bills needed, which is a little bit of toughness and tough to bring down and being able to be a little bit of a power back. He's got nice hands, so he's going to be able to, like you said, if
really nice in the screen game.
Yeah, for some reason Cook can't go, or there's something, I think that you don't lose how you can run your offense. Like, he can't do all the things that James Cook can do, but you can still have a pass catching back out of there, getting some work done. This does remind me a little bit of a Devin Singletary, not necessarily in the total style. I think it's in the things that don't always wow you about running
some
backs
of the little
like
wiggles.
Yeah, it's tight in space and good contact balance and hard to bring down. Like, those things matter in terms of drafting mid-round running backs. I don't think he's going to come in and just go crazy and wow people, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that's just productive enough to be like, oh, okay, like we really should get him looks and get him involved in this game a little bit more. And to your point, yeah, anyone that's caring about his age, maybe the mileage itself could be a concern. Sure. He was highly used, but I intend to just burn the rubber off those tires in this first 4 years of his contract, and then if he wants to come back cheap again, cool. But I don't care. I want running backs, especially 4th round running backs. I just want to get as much use out of them as I can, and then send them on their way. And so the age doesn't.
Late 4th, mid 5th is not a big difference anymore.
No, and so
shout out Spin pointed out here, there was a huge run on running backs after we took Davis. So if we waited, we probably would have missed out on that tier of guys. So
could be.
My game theory probably wouldn't even worked out, and it didn't matter because the guy I literally wanted,
you got him,
Solomon at that 4th round pick, and we got him later on. So
yeah, I like that. I think that there's a big contribution coming in 2024 in terms of that running back 2 role, which I project him to be getting in that. Maybe not even right away, but I think he'll take it over as the year goes on. I think that'll be a nice little role and some real production coming for him from this rookie class, which is great to get in the 4th round. If you're getting some real production in the 4th round, fantastic.
So although I do love Javon Solomon and was excited about there, I do still have him 5th. I had him ahead of Davis because of the position premium, but it's still his best case scenario is DN4, like this year, anyways. Like, maybe if he turns into something beyond there, that's great. But his best case scenario is DN4. He's also probably the most susceptible of any of these guys to being beaten out by a yet unnamed veteran signing, because by far the most talented free agent group left, like every offseason, is veteran pass rusher. They're still
get some mercenary dude.
Yeah, Yannick Ngakoue and Emmanuel Ogba and Carl Lawson, like guys who are going to make a roster and going to play meaningful snaps, are still free agents. Every other position other than like Justin Simmons, there are not impactful players left. There are like fringe roster guys. Pass rusher, like every year, there's the list of all the mercenary veteran pass rushers who are going to wait and sign a week or two into training camp
and just want to play third downs,
and just want to come in on 3rd down and chase quarterback, and they're good at it. So he's probably the most susceptible to getting beat by one of those guys.
Bring Jerry Hughes
I
home.
like him. Hey, honestly, yes. I'll give Jerry Hughes, a couple bucks to come and chase quarterbacks on third down. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
All right. So we both only have
We're into the top five now.
4 names left.
Yeah.
What is your order? Who is number 4 out of your remaining 4 bits?
Number 4 for me is DeWayne Carter, which I love. Everything about his makeup screams Sean McDermott process. I love this pick. This was, I think, our first mock draft with the guys at Cover One Draft Show. This was their pick. He was just screaming, sitting there on the board, screaming. This is a pick at a position of need. We just needed bodies, whether whoever it was. I think he comes in, he fits. He's a process guy. He's going to put his head down and grind. I think they can fit into the rotation. I don't expect a huge workload for him in year one. I think that he'll be part of the rotation. I don't think he's going to get a ton of sacks, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that's early on disruptive and just kind of always causing some disruption. And I love that. So I don't think the stat line won't always read great, and it's not going to be crazy, and he won't have like crazy amounts of production early on. But I do think he's going to win some one-on-one battles and be a fun player to follow and fun player to watch, and be part of a rotation that they needed. This was wide receiver was the one that everybody was pounding the table for, and we had to get away out of this draft, but I needed a body in the defensive tackle room out of this draft. And I think that they picked a guy that is a good fit. He's not the highest end athlete. He's not the highest end producer, but if you're going to miss on some of those things, at least get a guy that fits your team perfectly. Like, I could see this guy in a couple of years being a team captain, even if he's not crazy productive on the stat line. He just screams that to me.
So you talked about some of the off-field stuff. You got to remember, Duke is not a football factory, but they had a first-round pick this year on top of Carter coming out.
Yeah.
They had Graham Barton coming out.
Yep.
Graham Barton was interviewed talking about, and the guy asked him, like, is you being, what the biggest leader on that Duke team this year? Tell us a little bit. And he stopped the guy and said, hey, I did my part. I was a captain. I was a leader of this. I made sure to help drive the leadership of this team, but there was one leader on this team, and his name is DeWayne Carter.
Mm-hmm.
So the first round pick from his school stopped and said, no. I was not the leader of this team. We had one leader, and his name was DeWayne Carter. He was the first 3-time captain in their school history. Obviously smart enough to go to Duke as it is. So you're talking about a really intelligent guy as it is.
Right.
So I'll just kind of slide this in. I had him as my number 2. But for a lot of the same reasons that you did here, I loved getting the value of where he was. And I think he has a shot. I think he plays the third most snaps at defensive tackle. I think he plays more than Austin Johnson just because of the role.
Okay.
I think he plays like the 25% of 3-tech snaps when Ed Oliver's not on the field, because I do think Ed will play like 75% of the snaps at 3-tech. And then I think there's another 15 to 25% of snaps when it's obvious passing downs, and it's Ed and DeWayne Carter instead of Daequan Jones, who will play the primary 1-tech snaps in some pass rush. But I think we'll get the two of them on the field together in some obvious pass rushing downs that before would have been a Boogie Basham type defensive end kicking in or a Shaq Lawson type defensive end kicking in. Well, now we have DeWayne Carter. Now we have two productive 3-techs. You can let them push the pocket and pass rush from the middle. I think he can play 45 to 50% of snaps those two pockets and be very impactful. And I think that 45 to 50% will be more than Austin Johnson plays. I think that will keep Austin Johnson as the backup 1-tech in the 25% range. And then Daequan plays his 50, 55%. And those guys together are the 200% of the two tackle positions. I think that he's able to make that impact. My number 4, again, I was trying to be genuine to like what I thought. Obviously, the Bills know better than I do. Hell, Brandon Beane thought he needed to trade up from 60 to get this guy. I thought 60 was early for Cole Bishop. I like him. I liked him a lot. He was one of the guys that like, oh, maybe we'll be really lucky to get him at 128, or I wish we had the 3rd round pick back to get a guy like Cole Bishop. When he was picked at 60, I was like, oh, okay. Like, I like him. Like, he was a guy that I was, picked all the time, and he was on that list of safeties, but I didn't realize they liked him that much. So, I think there's a good shot that he will push Mike Edwards or Taylor Rapp for a starting spot. I think in 2025, he is a starting safety, and maybe we have a Ramon Humber, Matt Milano situation. And by the end of this season, maybe he's starting at a safety. So I like him. I'm happy with him. He is in my top 4, but just being, honest to my initial reaction, I had him 4th because I thought 60 was a little early for him. But again, Brandon Beane not only didn't think it was early, he had to stop himself from trading up because he didn't think Bishop was going to make him to him at 60. And they certainly know a lot more than I do.
Yeah. So we're into 3.
No, what's your 3? Yeah.
My number 3 is Keon Coleman. I'll be honest here. He was not my favorite wide receiver prospect. The lack of showing the ability to separate often concerned me because that's the number one thing that, for me, I think Josh Allen
get open,
needs.
Catch the ball.
Yeah.
Get open, catch the ball.
I think Josh Allen struggles to see receivers and throw with anticipation. And I think that that's actually where Keon Coleman's going to succeed the most. So maybe this is also going to be an evolution of Josh Allen's game within this offense, is doing that more and trusting guys that can get catches in some of those tight windows, that he'll be able to do that a little bit more when you're throwing with anticipation. So I am coming around to it. I want to say I love the guy's personality. He's definitely warmed to me just with the personality that he has. I'm more in on the pick than ever before because I do think he's going to fit right in. I think that he's going to bring an energy to the team, and there is something there. It's my concern with him wasn't athleticism. It wasn't the 40 time. I don't care about 40 time and stuff like that. He's a freak athlete. Like, I was not worried about his athletic ability.
He got on the court from fucking
correct.
Tom Izzo. I got on the court for Tom Izzo. Like, that's a freaky 2-sport athlete.
Yes, we talk about it all the time. I think basketball players are much better athletes than football players, and on the whole, like, you have some of the best basketball. In the NBA has probably the best athletes in the world combined. In the NBA, it might not be the best sport in the world, but I think athletically, you have to be a pretty freak to play at that level. And same with D1. I think he's a freak athlete. For me, it was the nuanced route running, which can be learned. It can be brought into his game a little bit more. But my concern of Josh Allen not throwing with anticipation all the time and needing to see guys open, my mindset going into the draft was like, let's just get a room full of guys that separate and they are seen and they're open, and you just roll with that. But
well, you like McConkey.
Yeah, totally. And I think, though, what I do like about this pick is you have some of those guys. We have some guys that can separate. We have some guys that can open. And this is a different tool in the chest. And I'm interested to see how they use it. But again, I'm going to say stay true to where I was. I didn't love him as the prospect. I'm getting on board just like I always do with Bills guys, but I'm not going to say that he was my favorite pick of this draft.
So my number 3 was Van Pran-Granger. I love the value of getting him there. I think almost everywhere that I saw had him as like a late 3rd round pick. And a lot of that was just because the relative value of center was a little bit lower. I think almost everybody had him as like the number 3, number 4 center. You're talking about a guy who had 44 straight starts at Georgia in the SEC against the best defense tackles in college football. I'm not going to go as far as to say that he changes the plan of moving McGovern to center, but I do think there is a non-zero chance that they get into camp and see him and go, oh, no, we can start him and we can put McGovern back at guard and just have a starting center right now. Like, if you start 44 games in the SEC, you can start in the NFL. Like, you can. So we'll see. He is not as athletic as Morse. We're not going to immediately have a Mitch Morris. I do think McGovern's probably more athletic than Van Pran-Granger, but Van Pran-Granger has a better anchor than anybody we've seen at center in a long time. You talk about needing to block the Quinn and Williams of the world and things like that. We'll see if he has the movement skills for what Aaron Kromer wants in this offense. But we also picked Osiris Torrance last year, who is not, the most mobile, nimble of foot guy, but he could mow people. And, putting those guys together, you're talking about a powerful center of the offensive line. As Ronald here is saying, last year he allowed 0 sacks, and in his career, in those 44 starts, he allowed 1 sack in his entire career. So I do think he has long-term starting potential. I don't know that we're going to see it this year, but I do love the fact that we have a legit center on the team who can snap the ball, and Will Clapp isn't the only guy who's, because Connor McGovern, Aaron Cromer's forgotten more about offensive line play than I'm ever going to know, but Connor McGovern's never snapped a ball in an NFL game, so anything saying that he can do that is pure projection. So I really like Van Pran-Granger. Obviously had him in my top 3. Is a huge value for where we got him in the 5th. I like him a lot, but he was my number 3 pick.
I've got him at number 2. And I'm going to just call him SVPG from here on out. I'm going to get a shirt. No, it's I think I'm going to go as far, and I'm pretty conservative with this stuff, Greg. And so I'm taking a chance here on a hot take. I think he is going to be the starter. I think that he is going to take the job. I think it's going to be a nice O'Cyrus Torrence situation where he gets into camp. I don't know if it'll be at center. I do think they also think he can play some guard.
Yeah, so but Bean talked about that. They think his primary is center, but they think he can play guard.
Correct. Yeah, because when he first got
a guy
drafted,
like that, if he can hold up against a Daequan Jones, and Daequan Jones says, no, this guy's got it, which I kind of think happened with O'Cyrus Torrence last year. If the D tackles vouch for him and Cromer sees it, they won't hesitate.
Yeah, and I think at this pick, I think Cromer was pounding the table in the draft room of like, get me this guy. I think that we can have an answer here. What's it? Tank Ninja saying here? Cromer said on Eric Wood's podcast he started Torrance first team thinking he would mess up. Yeah, never did. I think that's exactly the situation I see. Is you have a guy that, again, to your point, Greg, played in the SEC. Think about all the monsters that have come through the interior defensive line of the SEC over the last.
Think about what he had to do in practice just with the Georgia Tech defensive tackles every day.
Yeah, he's seen the best of the best, and he's done a good job holding up against them. There's no, that is the farm system of the NFL. We saw it with O'Cyrus Torrence. So I think you match up some SEC guys here in the middle, and you pair them together for a long time to protect Josh Allen. I do think he can do. I don't think he's the athlete Morse is, but Morse couldn't anchor like this guy can. And I'm not going to project him to be better than Mitch Morse. He's a great center, but I think he can move a little bit more than he's getting credit for. And I think he's going to get in there, not make a lot of mistakes, be a captain type personality early on in his career. And I think they're going to have a tough time pulling him back off the field. That's how I see it. So I think at the value of the pick too, as a 5th rounder, if you can get, even if it's not this year, if
you can make the argument, he's number 1.
That's where I'm at. Like, and maybe it's not this year that he's the starter this year, but even if he's the starter next year and you're getting that as a 5th round pick, like this, the ceiling on this just feels so good to me. This feels like when I find a really nice Under Armour quarter zip at the thrift store for like $12, dude. And I know that retail, I probably should have paid 120, but I'm getting out of here for $12. Like, that's how I feel about this pick.
I love it. I think that, again, I'm not ready to go quite that far, but it's not crazy. Like, and I think I loved that comment we shared from what Cromer said to Eric Wood on his podcast, because just a little behind the scenes stuff. I know for a fact, I saw the text message. Aaron Cromer did not love the O'Cyrus Torrence draft pick.
Yeah.
Aaron Cromer said naughty words about O'Cyrus Torrence. And that comment, I think, is genuine. He said he put him in there thinking he would mess up and to show them that, oh, why'd you pick this slow-footed, slogging guy? And he never messed up, and he kept the job, and he started every single snap his rookie season. So, Cromer has shown what he can do with these kind of athletes and these kind of powerful guys. And I saw another comment here that we are seeing a bit of a pivot to more powerful guys on the front line, and they like having that option to pivot. And that I think when you have a Josh Allen, when you have a Josh Allen, like, the whole idea of pass blocking is kind of relative as it is, because he's going to roll out whether you do it or not. He's going to make you look good whether you win your block or not. So being able to pivot and turn into a road grading offense, I think, is kind of an interesting strategic pivot, because guys who are really good pass blockers, sometimes Josh is going to roll out into the area that you were carrying your blocker into, thinking you were making a great block, and then Josh runs into a sack because he was going out there anyways. I kind of like that. And we still have
there's a zig and a zag that happens throughout the NFL all the time. And we've been going this direction of NFL offenses doing what college was doing and spreading out and getting smaller and doing all this stuff. And then you saw defenses adjust to that. And so now you have smaller defenses across the board. You're seeing smaller defensive tackles, smaller linemen. Guys are getting smaller in that front 7. how do you combat that and that speed? You get bigger and you get more physical. And we saw the Bills lean into a run game last year a little bit. And so I think that if the teams that are ahead of those curves and start to get ahead of those curves on the early side, those are the teams that will ultimately have the most success. So it plays right into that. Yeah. So what about you? Where were you at number two?
So number two, I had shared earlier, I went with DeWayne Carter.
Yes.
Just where the position premium. I loved him as a pick. I bought into Daniel Harm's hype of him having him as his defensive tackle too. And all the other pieces. I think that he is the highest floor pick of anyone we made. I am the most comfortable saying DeWayne Carter is going to be a contributing, playing NFL player more than any other of the 10 guys we picked. I am certain he is going to play in this league. Now, whether he becomes a superstar or where he might not have even the top 5 highest ceiling of the guys who, if they hit every one of their potential things, I am certain DeWayne Carter is going to be a contributor in the NFL and is going to play. There is such a low chance.
His floor is what? Harrison Phillips is the
like that kind of player is just going to be a really, really nice contributor that's going to play well. And that I'm not going to put this kind of pressure on him. I don't think it's fair to put anyone in this stratosphere, but there's a lot of the things of what Kyle Williams was with a DeWayne Carter. And again, Kyle Williams ended up being so much better than he was projected to be and all the different pieces there. But there are a lot of like similarities in the kind of player and leader in person that he was coming in and how that resonated from a value standpoint. And Harrison Phillips as well has a lot of traits from where that is. And, you know, Harrison's more of a one tech than a 3-tech, but that kind of, this is a guy who's going to play in this league for 10 years, like short of, you know, injury things. He's going to play in this league for 10 years and have a great career. I hope all 10 are with the Bills because I really, really like it.
That leaves only one person for your number one.
Yeah. So although Keon Coleman was not at the top of my list, he was on my list. When I was making my list that night going into that pick, I had 5 guys there and he was 5th on that list. So it's not like I was.
But that was just out of spite, right? No, I'm just kidding.
I joked earlier about, you know, that when people started turning on him, it really turned me off when people got so worked up about the 40 time, because I hate 40 times, especially when we saw the GPS tracking for him and like, hey, this is obviously just not a guy who runs track times well, but like he plays fast on the field. Like he's not like a hidden 4.3 guy, but even Bean said that, no, we saw his GPS tracking. He is a 4.5 guy. And you saw that when everybody running go routes at the combine, the same day as the 40, he was the 4th fastest out of everybody. The same day and against the exact same receivers, he was the fastest guy running the gauntlet. So everybody being worked up, being like, oh, well, he was one of the slowest guys when they were just putting their hand in the dirt, not doing football things. But when we see them doing football things, he's one of the fastest guys. I'll take the guy who was one of the fastest doing football things.
Right.
I think he has great hands. I am going to take a leap of faith in that I want this to be the evolution of Josh Allen as a quarterback, playing with more anticipation, being willing to throw to a guy with those kind of like, hey, I'm going to put it in a spot where you can go get it where the other guy can't, because that's what Joe Burrow does with T. Higgins. T. Higgins ran a 4.59. T. Higgins is not a great separator. T. Higgins does not immediately like flash open to let you fire the ball in there. He's open when he's not, because he can go up, jump over top of people, use his crazy wingspan and awesome hands to make catches that other guys can't make. And maybe that's the ceiling of what Keon Coleman could be. They were both 33rd overall picks. They ran super similar times. Coleman actually even jumped farther and jumped higher, more explosive drills. He was younger than Higgins when he was coming out. I think there's some benefit to the fact that he's not only 20 years old, but he was also, people talk about the 2-sport thing as like the versatility of the athleticism. He was also focusing enough on basketball to be able to play for Time Izzo at Michigan State. That means he wasn't 100% focused just on football. Well, now all he's going to do is football. That's his only thing. So I'm gonna tell myself, and again, this is me talking myself into things. I'm admitting that I'm going to tell myself that means he has a bit more capacity for improvement than some of the older prospects who are 22, 23, 24, and who have solely only focused on football. I think his special athleticism, him now going from a two-sport guy to a one-sport guy, him being 20 years old, all of that is going to let me tell myself that he has more capacity for improvement coming up here. So part of this is power ranking him number one on what we need him to be, as much as it is of whether he would have been my pick. I would have taken Xavier Legette. I pounded the table for him the whole time. I clearly would have taken him. I would have taken McConkey ahead of him. But I had him third of the receivers available there. So it's not like I was way out there. I had him third there. I think I had DeJean and Johnny Newton as my other two guys in the 5. But I had Coleman on my list. He was one of the guys that I was okay with. I was good with it. Again, I would have taken the other two receivers or DeJean or Newton, but he was on my list. So I'm not going to bash it as, I was out on Coleman. I was cool with him. But now I need to see Josh Allen capable of using a guy like him, because he needed the crutch for so long of, hey, I need to watch you visually flash open and then I can howitzer the ball in there before anybody else can break as a defender. And instead, I'm going to need you to anticipate where it needs to be and put it in the right spot and let your special athlete go up and get it over top of the other DBs, because he can jump higher than they can.
Yeah. And I think a part of it that has to be in the conversation is quarterback play from Jordan Travis. While he was a fun prospect and a fun college quarterback, not refined at all, very inaccurate. I think a lot more production was on the bone for Coleman in that offense. So
one quick one to that. There were multiple balls that, because Coleman is such a freaky athlete, he had no business getting a hand on.
Right.
But since he did get a hand on it, they counted it as a unsuccessful contested catch against him. And it was really just a horrendous throw that he had no business touching the ball, but they tracked it and monitored it as a unsuccessful contested catch, when anybody else would have just like watched it go over their head, and a former Buffalo Bill would have turned and given a side eye to the quarterback for such a horrible throw.
Yeah. I'll go into my number one now. Obviously, I only have one guy left. My number one is Cole Bishop. I agree with you that in the moment of the draft, I was shocked by how high he was selected, but I think that was me falling prisoner to the mock draft boards in the system that we play in this. And it's actually a really good reminder as a content creator when doing this, of like, my value and the value that we see is not true to the NFL. And we talk about it all the time. This is a thought exercise. And so at first I was a little taken back of like, really, like there, like I love the pick, and I'm so torn because I think screams Buffalo Bills fit to me. Defensive back, DB is my favorite position. I love what Sean McDermott's done with this defense. I love the way that he plays defense. I love the way that his safeties are used. And Cole Bishop just seemed the perfect fit to come into Buffalo and be the next great safety for the Buffalo Bills. And I don't know if that means starting right away, but God, I really think it is. I think he is going to come in and start. I think he takes over for Taylor Rapp immediately. I think that he's going to be a better player than Taylor Rapp. And I think you can pair him with Mike Edwards for a year while you try to figure out the other side of that. And you can have a really nice safety tandem and do all of the things that the Buffalo Bills want to do with the safety position. I think he comes in right away and fits the process. He fits exactly what they want to do. And then you can use him in those other situations because you still do have Taylor Rapp. You can use him in that big, thick dime, nickel, whatever you want to call it, and come in and play against tight ends because he is a tight end, a racer type dude. And so we see the league trending more into this 12 personnel, bigger personnel things. You need guys that can cover on these bigger dudes. He fits all that to a T. I love it. I absolutely think it's great. Greg Rousseau, he's probably the only reason I listen to One Bills Live. I think he's one of the best minds in the media when it comes to football, and he was raving about him. And whenever I'm on the same page with Greg Rousseau, good things have happened for the Buffalo Bills. And so this pick to me, again, a little shocking that it was a round 2, but I think that was just because I was so sucked up into the mock world. But you saw some of the things that I don't think they can. I think that GMs can lie during press conferences. I think that they can mislead during that type of stuff. But in some of that behind the scenes stuff, when they're in the draft room, those initial reactions that you see, those are genuine things. And to see Brandon Beane and everybody in there, like, yes, like we got him, put the pick in, we got the guy, he's there for us. Yeah, and look at this RAS score, 9.8. Like, this is the most athletic safety that we've had in Buffalo.
You talk about what they turned, again, average by pro athlete standards. All the other safeties and DBs that they've turned into all pro players were very average athlete. This is the most special athlete that they've had as a
under
building
30-inch arm length. Some people will.
Yeah, the arm length is short. It is. He needs to use the explosiveness and the speed to make up for that because he doesn't have the extra reach that some guys do. But you see it on the field. Like, he flies around like crazy.
Yeah, and just seeing the reaction of Bean and all these guys in the draft room, like they loved that he was there. It was their guy. And Bean even talked about like getting Yancey to move up for him. So the fact that they were so in on it, Greg Rousseau's in on it. This was a guy I took, I think, in every mock draft I did this year, obviously later than this pick. It just all lined up for me to be, I really think this is the future of safety and the next great safety and for a long time here for the Bills. So I'm really excited about this Bishop pick.
I love it. I love it. And, I think the exciting part is we see a path for a lot of these guys. I think 7 of these rookies are going to make the roster. I think that we talked about 4 or 5 of them here. They have a path at a starting spot. I think 3 of them are locked in, and then a couple of rotational guys. How many snaps DeWayne Carter plays, how many snaps Javon Solomon plays are all relative. We'll see where that goes, but we know Ray Davis has a role. We know Keon Coleman has a role. We know Cole Bishop has a role. We think that Van Pran-Granger has a shot to start here, but long term has that kind of potential. This looks like a really nice draft class. So I know that a lot of people wanted double dip, and by a lot of people, I mean me, at wide receiver. Maybe we still get a signing. We've seen some of the other additions that they're going with here. Once that money frees up June 1st, maybe we still have a little addition at pass rush or at wide receiver. We'll see where those things
go.
Trade
for Terrence Marshall. I'll do it today.
Yeah, and I think there's some. I think the Cortland Sutton thing is still in play.
Yep.
I think the Tyler Lockett thing is still in play.
I'd still do OBJ.
Honestly, yes. Like DJ Chark, Odell Beckham Jr. Heck, if you want to convince me Michael Thomas still has something to contribute, like at this point, what's the downside? Like, whatever. Like, let's find out. So we'll see where that goes. I'm cool giving one more of those veteran guys a shot because I do think there is a wide receiver 4. Honestly, would you be upset if they brought in Zay Jones as wide receiver 4?
No, I already said it. I think I would bring him in right now and just super cheap and say compete for it. Yeah. Like, what's the harm to do that?
I like Mac Hollins as wide receiver 5 special teams. I'm cool with whoever makes it out of Justin Shorter and Quintez Cephus and Brian Thompson and Terrell Shavers and Andy Isabella. Let them fight for wide receiver 6. That's fine.
All their stands are coming at us in the mentions, by the way.
Oh, I'm going to get yelled at. Yeah. I think wide receiver 4 is a sneaky, still open spot on this team. As Adam asked here, Zay Jones just got released by the Jaguars after they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. They released Zay Jones. And Ronald brought up Hunter Renfrow here. From everything I've read, I think he's considering retirement. If he decides he's still fully invested and wants to play football, I'm 100% on board with Hunter Renfrow. You talk about a guy who creates separation and catches the ball. That's the only thing the dude does. He can get open and catch the ball. So we'll see where that goes. Ronald brought up KJ Hamler. He was honestly in anything that we didn't mention earlier. He's actually competing with Daequan Hardy and those guys for the punt return job. Like if someone's going to come out of nowhere to win a punt return job, KJ Hamler is in that competition. You're
not wrong.
Right now, if we
can he stay healthy? That's the
touches.
I want to get excited about Hamler. Can he stay healthy? And that's just such a big if when guys haven't proven it.
Yeah. So we'll see where that one goes. And again, Keon Coleman was the punt returner at Florida State. So if that's a chance to build in a couple extra touches for him every game, I'm cool with that, to give him a shot to be able to do some things with that too. All right, man. We ended up going way longer than we expected.
I'm glad we did it this way though, because like we were saying, we were saying offline, like we're here on Wednesday, so there's been so many breakdowns of the class, and everybody's been doing their takes on the class. And so I'm glad that we did it in a different way for us, and to be able to power rank them and sort of project out what we think. So I appreciate you participating in that exercise with me. Maybe we'll have to make that a yearly thing, our power rankings.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. It was a good way to do it. I think we should adopt that. This is a really great idea of how to go through it. Hopefully everybody
Thanks.
enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, make sure to press that like button, help us out, press the like button, go in there. That's a way to share the word about the what we do and everything going on at Cover One. If you haven't seen it, and from everything I can see on YouTube, an awful lot of you have seen it. Eric did an awesome job on his Keon Coleman. If you want to see a very even-handed, objective review, he went through the good, the bad, and the ugly, all the things that go into Keon Coleman in his game. Some of the things we talked about, the projection, and the things we haven't really seen Josh Allen use, as well as the awesome explosion, crazy great run blocking, his physicality, his ability at the catch point, all the different pieces there, and the things he needs to improve if he wants to be able to create more separation at the next level and use some of that special explosion and ability that he has. We'll see where that goes. Any final thoughts for the people before we close it out?
Yeah, no, man. It's we're gonna get in here to the thick part of the off season, like you said. So bear with us. We'll have our content schedule coming out of what you can expect here over the next couple of months as we get ramped up for a training camp. But I'm real excited about this team and this draft. We know there's a ton of draft capital coming up in the future. This is kind of this like 2.0.
And more picks next year.
Yeah, this new 2.0. I don't think they're rebuilding. I think this is still a team that is definitely going to be in Super Bowl contention, division winning contention. I don't think they're doing what some people in the media are speculating, but they are revamping for this sort of Josh Allen, Sean McDermott 2.0 run. And right now, the early returns, this draft seems really intriguing to me. So I can't wait to see if our power rankings and some of these crazy projections we have for the guys, we see any early signs of it paying off here as we get into the summer.
Absolutely. So one final message before we sign off. You heard his contribution for our Pump the Brakes segment. One final message here from our sponsor of the show, William Mattar.
If you've been in a car crash, you should know this. At William Mattar, there's no fee until we win. That means you don't pay us unless we win your case. If you're hurt in a car, call William Mattar, 444-4444.
On behalf of our team at Cover One here, fantastic producer Chris Kepner and Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are